Welcome to the Presence Driven Life podcast. I'm Cindy Powell, your host and a fellow pilgrim on the journey to know Jesus and make him known. The world around us has grown increasingly chaotic, but in his presence is fullness of joy. Join me today as we explore what it might look like to live from the beauty and peace of his presence. Hi everyone, Cindy Powell again with the Presence Driven Life podcast. I'm going to be doing something just a little different today. I'm doing a little solo episode that I'm calling Clarity. I'm not sure yet if this is going to be one and done or if this will be something that I might turn into a regular feature from time to time, but we'll just go forward and see what happens. Anyway, the reason for the title really is exactly what it sounds like. I want to provide clarity on a few things. At the time I'm recording this, we've completed 6 regular episodes, and already we've addressed several different topics with several different people, which is great, and I absolutely hope that trend continues. But it has also caused me to step back, really to seek my own clarity on a few things, which is what prompted this episode. One of the advantages of doing a weekly podcast as opposed to a single message somewhere is that you do have the opportunity to build on topics as you go along. Likewise, if something comes out in the moment that perhaps could have been a little confusing or it presented only one side of an issue, you have the opportunity to go back and bring some clarity. A friend of mine had this analogy about clarity that I just love. She likened it to having a multi-course meal in a fine dining establishment. Often between courses, the staff will bring out what they call a palate cleanser. That way, nothing from the last course, there's no bad taste in your mouth. So nothing from the last course alters your taste for what's ahead. And I thought that was a great analogy because clarity really is like a palate cleanser. It's an opportunity to clear up any misperception so you can move on to the next course with a clean palate. Anyway, like I said, we've only had 6 episodes, so it's not like I feel like there's been a great deal of misperception. But I do feel like in any given episode, you can never cover all the bases. And it probably doesn't bother anybody else, but it sometimes bothers me. You've probably all realized by now that I am a fan of the expression both and. And by that, I mean a lot of issues, they're not either or. They are both and. There is weight on multiple sides of an issue. And because of that, in the context of any given 30 to 40 minute podcast, it is absolutely impossible to give full weight to all sides of an issue. And again, like I said, that may not bother anybody but me, but because it is something that I tend to think about, because I do tend to see things from diverse perspectives, I just want to keep checking in with myself and, of course, with Jesus to make sure we're staying on topic and true to mission. We're still new at this point, so I just want to keep making sure we stay in alignment with where the Lord is taking us. So, in no particular order of importance, here are just a few of the things that have been on my heart to clarify. I realize I just said they are in no particular order of importance, but the first issue probably actually is the most important because it's exactly what I just said. It's about staying on mission. And of course, the mission of the Presence Driven Life podcast is living a presence driven life. When you talk about things like living authentically from his presence and what does it mean to live a presence driven life, I've realized that it literally covers every single area of our lives, especially our spiritual lives. And that's why we've already had really diverse conversations covering such things as simple and sweet personal testimonies of connecting with his heart, all the way to things as heavy as safely welcoming and ministering to trauma victims in our churches. Last week, we even delved into the hugely broad and complex issue of unity in the church. So my question to Jesus and myself has been, are we addressing these issues in a way that is staying true to the centrality of his presence? And so far, I feel like his answer to me has been that yes, that is the case. And of course, my prayer is that it will continue to be so. As things unfold, I suspect we will address even more diverse topics, and that's great. We've got a couple of good ones coming up. But what I really wanted to elaborate on or clarify here, if you will, is that the connecting thread in all of this is really just that. It's connection. I mean, that's my heart in every single episode you will ever hear on this podcast. It's clearing out the clutter. It's cleansing the palate, if you will, so that we can connect more deeply with Jesus and his presence. So, in having diverse conversations, including delving into issues that aren't always addressed honestly, not to mention aren't addressed redemptively, my hope and prayer is that it will help remove some of those barriers that keep people from connecting more deeply with Him. If something needs to be brought into the light, that's where He is. So let's do it. All that to say, we're going to continue to have a diverse variety of topics, including the simple and sweet, which I personally love very much. But the common thread you're going to be able to see in all of it is that the goal will always be establishing deeper connection to His heart for a wide cross section of people. And again, the reason I'm taking the time to go over this is because we are a new podcast. And I don't want any mission drift. I want to make sure that where we're going is where He's leading us. And again, that there's that common theme of connection in absolutely everything we do. Speaking of connection, that brings me to another topic, which is to clarify our feelings about the church. And when I say the church, I'm speaking of expressions of the local church as well as the capital C collective church. There was an episode a couple weeks ago when I was talking with my friends Brian and Eliza, and we were saying some things that I realized as we were talking could be perceived as critical toward the church. At the time, I sort of muttered under my breath an assurance that we love the church. And although it was definitely loud enough to be picked up in the episode, I feel like it bears repeating. We are connected to the church. I love the church. The people I'm interviewing love the church. No ifs, ands, or buts. We are all church people and we love the church, period. Because Jesus loves His church. He really doesn't give us an option. But loving the church, being connected to the church, doesn't mean that we have to pretend that we always get it right, because of course we do not. It goes right back to the same issue about needing the freedom to be honest without fearing that we'll be accused of being overly critical or overly judgmental. And who knows, maybe somewhere down the line those accusations will come, and maybe sometimes they'll even be partly true. Again, we're all in process. We're not going to always get it right, but whether or not we always get it right when it comes to our discussions regarding the church, I did feel it was important to clarify that our heart motive is never, ever, ever to tear down the church, not the local church, not the capital C church. It is to build her up. It is to see her become all that Jesus has dreamed she would be. And for that to happen, we have to be able to be honest with ourselves and with each other about the areas where there is still great lack and where significant change is needed. In fact, we have an episode coming up next week where we're going to discuss one of those pretty heavy areas of need in the church. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Okay, so I hope you're still hanging in there with me. Another thing I want to talk about, just because it's super important to me, is the issue of the power of God for instant deliverance and freedom versus the daily process of giving feet to truth and walking it out. And I just want to shout from the rooftops that I believe in both. I absolutely 100% believe in both, and we need both. I feel like some of our conversations so far have centered more around the need for endurance and how we need to continue to press on to lay hold of the things Jesus has already purchased for us, because that's what's been relevant to those particular conversations. Again, in a single episode, you can't give full weight to all sides of an issue. In fact, there's probably going to be a few more of those issues coming up, speaking about the need for endurance, the need to walk it out. These conversations are important because our human nature tends to want instant supernatural deliverance in all things. I mean, who doesn't? Please hear me. I love big testimonies. I even have some, but the fact remains that most of the time, even when there has been a miraculous touch from God, there is still cooperation needed on our part as far as walking it out to fully lay hold of everything God started in a moment. While many folks only want to talk about instant miraculous encounters with God, I am also keenly aware that there are large parts of the church that really, sadly, don't believe Him for much of anything, and they think miracles are mostly relegated to a bygone era. And honestly, that posture hits my heart harder than those who want instant everything, because it denies the power of who God is. So I want to say again, just in case anybody's confused, I absolutely 100% Believe in the power of God to save, heal, and deliver, to break absolutely any stronghold in a single moment. Like I said, He has done it for me on more than one occasion. Those are my testimonies. And those encounters have marked me and changed my life. But even in those instances, even in those miraculous touches, even in the biggest testimonies of my life, I still had to walk it out day by day. Once again, both and, not either or. And again, because it's something that is just so very important to my heart, I don't ever want to diminish the power of who Jesus is or diminish anyone's faith to believe Him for the miraculous, because He is a miracle working God. There is no way you can exaggerate His goodness. There is no way you can overestimate what He is able to do. He is able. But even when He touches us in the most miraculous ways, there is always still a journey to lay hold of it and to stay in that place of healing and wholeness. Okay, so one of the final things I wanted to address in this episode, or at least I think it'll be one of the final things, is I want to go back to something I said in the very first episode. I made a reference to the fact that there is no such thing as intimacy or friendship with God apart from acknowledging and surrendering to His Lordship. I'm sure that doesn't sound like an even remotely controversial statement, and it's not. I 100% believe it. However, the reason the statement stuck in me and I wanted to press into it a bit more is because of another statement I use quite frequently, even though I didn't bring that statement up in the episode. And that statement actually might seem a little more controversial to some, even though it's something I believe to my core. And that statement is that intimacy with God is never, ever based on performance. So there's no intimacy with God apart from acknowledging Him as Lord, and intimacy with God is never based on performance. Do they contradict each other, or can they both be true? And I just needed to press into that for myself. I mean, obviously, I do believe they can both be true because I believe both of those statements. I absolutely believe that they coexist. And here's why I believe both are true. When I talk about intimacy with God not being based on performance, I mean there's no level of holiness or obedience to a certain number of commands that you have to achieve in order to draw near to His heart. He loves you, period. Simply because He loves you. There is no baseline level of performance or acts of righteousness that must be accomplished before you can claim to know His heart. But there is one thing that is absolutely needed, and that is faith. You have to believe. That's where the initial statement that there is no intimacy with God apart from acknowledging His Lordship comes in. I come with at least a minimal baseline understanding that He is God and I am not. And there is no way to know Him apart from that, because you have to know He is, and He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Yet despite the fact that He's God and I'm not, He loves me with an everlasting love. I don't need to get my act together before I can draw near. All I need to do is believe and receive. His love is unconditional and without measure. To all who are thirsty, He still says, come right here, right now, just as you are, without a single hoop to jump through. The only qualifier, if you want to put it that way, is in order to receive, you have to believe. Now, as you come to know who He is and surrender more and more to His authority, obviously that does bring change to your life, but how fast and in what areas varies vastly by individual. That's why we can't tell from the outside looking in what the depth of someone else's relationship with Him is. It's not based on appearance, it's based on the heart. There is probably not another living soul on the planet who had any question about my original statement, but because the idea of removing hindrances and obstacles that keep people from His heart is of such deep importance to me, it's something I knew I needed to clarify for my own peace of mind. I don't want to put even the tiniest statement that would lodge something in somebody's mind that would make them think there's a hoop they have to jump to before they can get to Him. Do you need to acknowledge Him as Lord? Yes, because that's who He is. But that's it, guys. Just believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. Just come, because His arms are open, ready and waiting for you. Intimacy with God is never, ever, ever based on performance. So don't let that be an obstacle to you coming closer to know His heart. So I think that's about it. The only other thing I do want to just briefly mention is a little bit about format. I had initially mentioned that we were going to be doing a series about what it means to live authentically from His presence. And really, that's pretty much what we've been doing. That was pretty much the starting point for all of our original interviews, and it has led to some great discussions. However, going forward, I feel like Jesus just wants us to let things flow organically without the restriction of trying to tie things to a particular series or theme, apart, obviously, from the overall mission of the podcast itself, which we've already discussed. So we're going to just stay present in His presence and see how He leads us week by week, which sort of seems appropriate for a podcast called The Presence Driven Life, doesn't it? Anyway, I'm super glad you are all along for the journey, and I just pray grace, 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 grace over you as you seek His face and learn to live from the beauty of His presence. Blessings to y'all. See you next time. Bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you would also consider leaving a rating or review, it really helps other people find us. The Presence Driven Life podcast is a ministry of the Arising Global. If you would like to find out more about the Arising or would like to support this podcast, please visit thearisingglobal.com. Have a great week, living out of the abundance of His presence.